Welcome to our channel Medico's Learning Decks. Here we will discuss easy mnemonics, high yield topics and integrated revision of topics related to medicine. So let's start. So today's topic is the layers of the retina. So let's start. We will see how to identify the layers of the retina. Okay, let's see. So first, this is a gross image of the retinal layers. Okay, you would be given to identify the different layers of the retina. You'll be marked one layer and then you'll be asked to see which layer is it. So first we will see how to identify it. Okay, let's start. See, first what we see is identify the choroid layer. Okay, first we will identify the choroid layer. The choroid layer we will identify by the melanin deposits. See, these black deposits or melanin deposits and this blood vessels. Okay, this blood vessels, we can see the melanin deposits, this black deposits, that is the melanin deposits in the choroid layer, and the venules and arterioles. The venules and the arterioles, these are the arteries and the veins. Arteries and veins we can see. So by all this we can identify the choroid layer. Okay, first we identify the choroid layer. Now after identifying the choroid layer, the just above this we see a broad pigmented line. Can we see this? Can you see this? This broad pigmented line is known as the pigment epithelium. Okay, so now coming to the next three layers. Now here we can see a bunch of nuclei. Here another branch and here another branch. So three bunch of gross nuclei we can see. Three layers. So the layer which is closer to the choroid, that is this layer, that is the outer nuclear layer. Just remember the name of the layers now. Later we will see that which nuclei are present in which layers. Okay, so now for the first layer of nuclei we see which is closer to the choroid, that is the outer nuclear layer. Then the next layer is inner nuclear layer. Okay, inner nuclear layer. Then the most farthest away is the ganglion cell layer. Okay, ganglion cell layer. Now in between we can see, between the outer nuclear layer and the inner nuclear layer, between the outer nuclear layer and inner nuclear layer, there is a lightly pigmented layer, that is the outer plexiform layer. Okay, that is the outer plexiform layer. And in between the inner nuclear layer and the ganglion cell layer, there is another lighter pigmented layer, that is known as the inner plexiform layer. Okay, so now we got the gross idea about the layers. That is, first we will identify the choroid layer by seeing the melanin deposits and the venules and arterioles. Okay, the broad pigmented line which we can see, that is the pigment epithelium. Then we see the nuclear layer. Three nuclear layer are present. Three bands of nuclei we can see. So the closest one to the choroid is the outer nuclear layer. Then comes the inner nuclear layer. Then comes the ganglion cell layer. Okay, and in between we see outer plexiform layer and inner plexiform layer. Okay, so another two layers we will see, that is in between the pigment epithelium and in between the outer nuclear we see layers of rods and cones, okay, and above the ganglion cell layer, there is the nerve fiber layer. So we had a gross idea how to identify these layers. Now we will see more in details which element is present in which layers. Okay, so let's see. Just now have a overview of the layers identified. Okay, just try to see the layers and identify. This I have given just a similar photo but just of different kind. So here to identify, we see first we have to identify the choroid layer. Which one is the choroid layer? We have to see venules and arterioles or melanin pigments. So here I can see some arterioles and venules. Okay, and here this color, this black melanin pigments are also present. So this is my choroid layer. First I have done this. First rule is identify the choroid layer. Okay, the next is just above the choroid layer there will be one pigmented line which will be the retinal pigmental epithelium. Okay, retinal pigmental epithelium. Next is to identify the nuclear layer. Here we can see a band of nuclei, here we see a band of nuclei, and here we can see a band of nuclei. So this must be my outer nuclear layer. This is my inner nuclear layer, and this is my ganglion cell layer. Okay, 3 nuclear layers done. Now we will see the plexiform layers. Okay, now we will see the plexiform layers. In between the outer nuclear and the inner nuclear, is the outer plexiform layer. Okay, this is the outer plexiform layer. Now in between the inner nuclear layer and the ganglion cell layer will be my inner plexiform layer. So we found out ganglion cell layer, inner nuclear layer, outer nuclear layer. In between are the plexiform layers, that is outer plexiform and inner plexiform. Now we will see another 2 layers, that is just above the ganglion cell layer will be the nerve fiber layer. So this is my nerve fiber layer. Okay, and the layers of rods and cones will be between the outer nuclear layer and retinal pigment epithelium. So here is my layer of rods and cones. This is my layer of rods and cones. So I hope we were able to identify this. So now let's see into details of this. Okay, so grossly we have a comparison present over here, done over here. See, the ganglion cell layer will have the ganglion cells. Okay, the inner nuclear layer will have the bipolar cell, horizontal cell, and the amacrine cells. Okay, then the outer nuclear layer will have the nuclei of the photoreceptors, that is the rods and the cones. The nuclei of the rods and the cones will be present in the outer nuclear layer, and the outer segment of the photoreceptors, that is the outer segment of the rods and the cones, will be present in the layer of rods and cones layer. Okay, so here first we identified the choroid. See, there black pigment is there, so melanin is present, so choroid. So coming from outside, that is outer nuclear layer, inner nuclear layer and ganglion cell layer. In outer nuclear layer we find nuclei of the photoreceptor. Nuclear layer we find bipolar cell nuclei, horizontal cell nuclei, amacrine cell nuclei, and these three. Okay, and in ganglion cell layer we'll find ganglion cell nuclei. So I hope it's done. Up till this, what you have learned, it's enough for NEET PG. I think you just need to identify and know the basics of what nuclei are present. Now if you want to see in details of what are present and all the layers of the retina in details, then we will see through this also. Okay, first this is my choroid side. Okay, so the first layer will be the pigment epithelium layer. Okay, pigment epithelium, which we saw as a dark line of pigment, that is just crossing the choroid will be my pigment epithelium. Okay, and the farthest layer to the pigment epithelium, to the choroid, will be the nerve fiber layer and the internal limiting membrane. Nerve fiber layer and the internal limiting membrane. Okay, that will be towards the vitreous side. Okay, that will be towards the vitreous side. So from choroid side we are coming into the vitreous side, that is from outside to inside. Okay, from outside to inside we are coming, choroid to the vitreous. Okay, the choroid to the vitreous. Now let's see. Okay, first we found out the pigment epithelium. First is the pigment epithelium. Now is the layer of rods and cones. Layer of rods and cones. See here, layer of rods and cones. Here the outer segment of the rods and cones are present. Okay, outer segment of the rods and cones will be present. Now comes the external limiting membrane. This is the external limiting membrane. Okay, it will be a fenestrated membrane to just pass the processes of the rods and cones. Okay, now coming to the outer nuclear layer. See, outer nuclear layer will have the nuclei of the rods and cones. See, here are the nuclei of the rods and cones. Nuclei are present in the outer nuclear layer, and the outer segment of the rods and cones we called it as layer of rods and cones. Okay, so first pigment epithelium, then layers of rods and cones, then external limiting membrane, then outer nuclear layer, then comes the outer plexiform layer. Outer plexiform layer. Okay, it will contain the connection between the rods, spherules and cone pedicles with the dendrites of the bipolar cells and the horizontal cells. That is, it is a connection between the outer nuclear layer and the inner nuclear layer. Okay, inner nuclear layer we find cell body of the, that is the nuclei of the horizontal cell, amacrine cell and Muller cells. Okay, see, amacrine cells, horizontal cells and bipolar cells. We find all this nuclei in the inner nuclear layer. Okay, now comes the inner plexiform layer. Inner plexiform layer will similarly form connection between the bipolar cells and the ganglion cells. That is, it forms a connection between the inner nuclear layer and the ganglion cell layer. Okay, the ganglion cell layer will consist of the cell bodies of the ganglion cells. See, nuclei of the ganglion cell, and the nerve fiber will contain the, see, last is the nerve fiber layer, which will contain the axons coming out from the ganglion cells. So these are the axons which optic nerve, which later on form the optic nerve. Okay, later on form the optic nerve. So the axons coming out from the ganglion cell layer will be present in the nerve fiber layer. Okay, nerve fiber layer. Then the utmost or last is the internal limiting membrane. Okay, internal limiting membrane, which differentiates the layers of the retina from the vitreous. Layers of the retina from the vitreous. So last will be the internal limiting membrane. So we will revise it once again. What were the layers? First was pigment epithelium, then it was layers of rods and cones, then it was external limiting membrane, then it was outer nuclear layer, then outer plexiform layer, then inner nuclear layer, then comes the inner plexiform layer, then comes the ganglion cell layer, then nerve fiber layer, and then last is the internal limiting membrane. Okay, so retina is consisting of 10 layers. Okay, but the functional component of retina is divided into only two functional components. That is the first layer or retinal pigment epithelium, and all the next 9 layers are known as neurosensory retina. Okay, so 10 layers are there. Only the first is retinal pigment epithelium, and all the next comes under neurosensory retina. Okay, neurosensory retina. So these are the two functional components of the retina. Now here another question comes, that is, which one is called as the first order neuron, which one is called the second order neuron, and which one is the third order neuron. So first order neurons are the rods and cones. Then comes the bipolar cells, and then the third order neuron is the ganglion cell. So remember this also, it's asked, that is first order neuron, rods and cones, second order neuron, bipolar cells, third order neuron, ganglion cells. So this was it. I hope you got a clear idea about how to identify the layers of the retina, and also cross idea about the layers of the retina. Okay. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Do like, share and subscribe to this channel to get more videos of this kind.